Wednesday. It's another session of lunchtime session of disorganized play. Disorganized play. What's going on today? We're going on a little trip. We're going on a little cruise. We're going on a little expedition to the Barrier Peaks. Do 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 da da da. Hey everyone, welcome to Disorganized Play, our weekly. What is happening now? That is. Okay, something else is happening. I have auditions, everyone. Auditions. It's important that I have them. Welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining me. One of the reasons we have our while we're having a lunchtime version of the show, a lot of things going on. That's one of the reasons. Yeah, so I have a callback this afternoon that I found out about at 9:30 this morning. So that's high-class problems. Good news for everyone, right? So, thanks for joining me. Every week, every Tuesday, we get together and we talk about what's going on in our weekly game of Dungeons & Dragons. Every Wednesday, we sit down and play the Dungeons & Dragons. You, hopefully, join us for that. And then every Thursday, I sit down and go through and talk about what happened in this week's game of Dungeons & Dragons. It seems a little incestuous, perhaps. It seems a little self-involved, a little narcissistic. Well, welcome to Los Angeles, everyone. Also, I think it's a way for us to learn, right? If you just run your game every week and then you never think, like, talking about what happened, what went right, and what went wrong helps me refine what happens next session. I think I've certainly done the thing where you kind of have the debrief in the car and then you never really talk about it again, or you never talk about it with your players again. And I don't think that's helpful for improving next time. And I'll be the first to admit that although I have literally decades of experience doing this, there's always room for improvement, right? Every group is a little bit different. Every adventure is different. Every amount of prep that you have is different. Sometimes the way you're feeling is just different. So the more you can learn from your own experience and other people's experience, the better prepared you are next time. It's that whole 10,000 hours worth of mastery, right? Doesn't always hold up. But if you don't sit down and talk about it, then it's very difficult to glean insight. So this is useful for me. I hope it's useful for you to see where I have found that the game has gone astray or something worked particularly well, and then talk through how it could be even better or what could be fixed or adjusted. We're going to do some of that today. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. I know it's an odd time, but here we are. So, yes, we do still use break a leg. In fact, it is ridiculously superstitious of me, but I prefer that over anything else. So honestly, I don't really even like talking about my callbacks because it's just another part of the business for me, and it is an essential step in getting that gig. But people who are not in the business don't understand that it's only one part. It often seems like, oh, well, if you do really great at your callback, then you book the job. That's not always true. And it is literally step 2 of 4 before you find out what the job is, right? So the callback is you get a callback, then you get put on a veil, and then they let you know whether you booked or not. And even if you booked or not, you may book the job, shoot it, and then it doesn't come out. I did a movie over a year ago that I literally spent a week and a half working on. It's a very small part. I spent a week and a half on it. It has not come out. I got paid for the time that I shot it, but this business is a very strange kind of business. That all being aside, let's talk about the business we have before us. So we're going to talk about goals versus plans, the role of clues as tools for the players, and then we're going to talk a little bit of query obstacle reveal, which is my own personal, one of my tools that I have in my quiver. Your quiver is not something you put on your head. Everyone, don't wear a quiver of arrows on your head. I was thinking of like a feather that I have in my cap. It's not a feather that I have in my cap. It's a quiver that I have in my. It's an arrow that I have in my quiver. Whew. Got a lot going on today. All right. So with that being said, I probably will, well, I will definitely wrap it up right at 1:30. Just FYI. So, goals versus plans, the role of clues as tools for the players, query, obstacle, reveal. We're not going to go into a deep examination of query, obstacle, reveal, but we are going to talk through it a little bit. I don't have the overhead camera set up. I found out about this callback on my way to take the dog to physical therapy, and therefore I did not have as much time to set up the home studio here or to stop at the regular saving. Everyone say hi to Dom at Saving Throw Show, who's in the chat here today. He's at the actual studio. He could do all of this stuff. All right, so something that occurred to me as an ongoing issue. I'll make myself a note here. There's something else that I might talk about today as well that seems relevant. So something that occurred to me is an issue that I have encountered regularly, not necessarily just in this game, but it kind of in my DMing career, right? Which is you ask the players what their plan is. I'll give you an example from a campaign I ran several years ago. The players had been screwed over by the mafia in Tallis, right? Familiar with Monty Cook's Mega City campaign setting? We were playing in Tallis, and the players had been screwed over by the mafia there. They had their base of operations. They were running a casino as sort of a fun little side venture apart from adventuring. They wanted to kind of run a business, and that was cool. But the mafia came in and screwed over and basically took over their casino while they were off adventuring, investigating something else. So they were rightfully upset with the head of the mafia, and they're like, "We're going to get this guy." And I said, "Okay, great, all right. That sounds like vengeance is a strong motivator. You're clearly invested in this thing. What's your plan?" "Well, we're gonna screw him over. We're either gonna capture him or we're going to or murder him." Okay. What's your plan, though? And I think sometimes, both on the DM side of the screen and also on the player side of the screen, there is confusion over what is your goal and what is your plan, right? So their goal was to screw over the head of the mafia guy. Their plan was we find him. Again, a plan has concrete steps used to achieve a specific goal. Yes, in order to screw over this guy, you need to find him, but that's merely another goal within your greater framework, within your greater aim, right? Find, Kevris Killraven is not a plan. If you say, we're going to try and infiltrate the local underground gambling ring by leveraging some of our contacts, that's a plan, okay? But players sometimes get confused, and the DM sometimes, I think as the DM, you sometimes get confused as to what's a goal, something you would like to achieve, and what's a plan. So one is abstract and one is concrete, right? I think we've been having some of that same issue here in the Iron Keep in the last probably 2 or 3 sessions, right? And partly they have a goal, which is to find the God's Fire, but they don't have a very good plan for doing so, right? And I would suggest we spend a lot of time, doing DM advice, and we always talk about, okay, what's the hook for the players? What's their motivation, right? And yes, that's important, but in this case, our party is strongly motivated. They really want to find the God's Fire. Okay? We don't spend a lot of time in the GM prep side of things talking about how do I feed players information or help them develop concrete actionable items that they can execute in order to fulfill that hook, to chase down that thing that they're pursuing, right? A lot of times this is sort of taken care of us by the simple dungeon setup, right? Which is you start at point A, entrance to the dungeon. There are 1 to 10 paths through the dungeon, but they eventually end up through basically funneling the characters through a parade of monsters and traps. Once they overcome those obstacles, they get to their goal, which is to find treasure, right? They don't really need a plan for that. You can ask, you can ask some finer details in terms of what's your marching order and what's, what are you doing to search for traps and those sorts of tactical type of things, right? Admittedly, like most of your plans have some sort of tactical component to them, right? But we just don't spend a lot of time thinking about or talking about the DM prep part of it, which is arming the players with enough knowledge so that they can synthesize it into a group of discrete actionable items, right? And in that case, we are focusing on the goal, but sacrificing the plan. And the problem is, you can have a goal, but if you don't have a plan, everybody sort of like sits and stares at each other and aimlessly goes, do you want to go left or right? How do we find this? We look at the murder mystery thread that we had in the last arc, and they had a goal: find whoever's responsible for this murder mystery. They didn't really have very good plans for executing that. They didn't have enough information. It's like it literally came down to, let's just talk to the next PC in the chain. We go to that guy. That guy tells us that this lady is involved. We go find her. We talk to her. She says, go to this place. We go to this place. We find another guy. Not an actually like very fun plan, because part of the enjoyment out of the players having the pieces to put a plan together is that they choose the path that they want to pursue, and they get to mitigate the risk and reward, or what makes the most sense. They get to navigate that with some active personal buy-in, as opposed to just being sort of led by the nose toward their goal. So it's something that like dawned on me recently. It's been kind of like lingering at the back of my mind, but it's become evident, I think, in this last session where we did some fun things like discover the tech tree, and certainly there was this goofy combat with all the various robots and whatnot, right? But they don't have a very strong plan for how they're going to get to the God's Fire. They know one thing. They know a couple things. They know they need to get a blue key. They've been told maybe if they talk to Sabina and Sebastian, they might be able to repair the network that would enable Angelica to help them find a blue key. But even that, like, they don't know exactly where Sabina and Sebastian are. They don't get to make informed choices. It's literally been, well, the most information that we have is that we should go this way. And so we saw that absolute like breakdown of the planning process, right? Essentially, it's fundamentally a breakdown in synthesizing whatever information's available to them, which is not their fault. The breakdown is caused by the scarcity of information available to them, right? But we saw that when they got 3 questions, ask a god, and the issue was they said, well, is it this way? Is the key this way? Is it this way? Is it this way? And they got no, 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 and so they're like, it must be this way. Which, when the players are fumbling for a solution or grasping for a solution, make a note as a DM, because that's a red flag that they have misunderstood something. They are probably missing something, or I don't know. Those are the two main ones, right? Or there's a breakdown in the communication between the players, right? If somebody, it might be a combination. It might be just be bad communication between the party. I would say those are the three major things, right? They're misunderstanding a clue that you left, misunderstanding / forgot. You know, it's possible that they've forgotten a clue. They're missing information. I don't know what the difference between them not knowing and them having forgot. So maybe it attaches more to that. But regardless, it's either a misunderstanding, an absence of information, or a breakdown in the communication between the players. I think, you know, Dirk Portley, hello Jordan, how are you? Makes the rather correct observation that movies train us to think that any plan you make out loud has to fail. I think that's also actually a social construct that's baked into Dungeons and Dragons, in that the origins of Dungeons and Dragons have such an adversarial relationship between the DM and the players. At least there's a certain style of play that reinforces that aspect. That there's a lot of hesitance for the players to go, okay, well let's not discuss what we're going to do, because that will tip the DM off, and then he can foil that or complicate that or whatever. You know, essentially, like, we don't want to show our hand as to what we're planning, because the DM's just going to make it harder for us to achieve what we want to do. So why not either? I mean, I've done stuff where it's like, okay, well, I'm going to go out of the room for 10 minutes and you guys talk about it. It's a pretty weird social kind of situation, right? But it's a perfectly natural thing, and it's an issue. I think you need to set some ground rules in the social contract. You know, like Dungeon World says, be a fan of the players, right? And I believe that it's a balancing act that you have to play, where you want to be a fan of the players, but you also want them to feel like they've earned whatever reward is given to them by overcoming whatever obstacles in front of them. And so if they come up with a really good plan that's too easy, then the DM's only going to make it harder, because the DM can't change the reward on the back end, right? That's sort of the assumption. So I think it's a difficult social contract that's sort of baked into the DNA of Dungeons and Dragons for sure, and kind of role-playing games, etc., right? And unless it's a really collaborative role-playing game, or it's a game like Fiasco where it's like everybody's job is to kind of complicate things and make them as crappy as possible. You know, there are exceptions to it, but I think especially in D&D, there is that dynamic of the DM is the one who is going to push problems at you, and so if you take problems away from him or her, then the DM's going to add some in or put a twist on or screw you over, right? Fair enough. So how do we address this, right? And I think, I don't know how deep this particular topic is, but moving on to the role of clues as tools for players, right? So I think it's very easy to think of clues as things that advance the plot, right? So if we look back at our murder mystery, we might know that so-and-so has a bunch of books about Asmodeus. Okay. We know that there's a secret sect of bards who have infiltrated the Bards Guild in town. Okay, all right. Those are pieces of information that do illuminate the plot, right? That's important. But I think you also have to think of an entire different category of players, or different category of clues, which are clues that give information the players can use to their advantage. right? And it's not necessarily something that advances the plot, but it might promote a greater understanding of the given circumstances of the world or whatever. So, for instance, in our Expedition to the Barrier Peaks game, right, there's a bunch of things going on with the plot in terms of the God's Fire and the AIs and, Barshala and the status of the ship and da 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 da, right? All that. That's all going to hopefully be revealed and explored and reach some interesting kind of climaxes and resolutions, right? That's the plot end of things. What the players don't have is a ton of clues about how this place works. And I'll give you the key clutch example of how this plays out, which is in the original adventure, your goal is to escape the ship, right? Collect enough key cards that you can open enough doors and fight your way through enough weird stuff so that at the end of that 4 hours or whatever it is, you've either advanced to the next level or ultimately escaped to the ship. I'm more and more convinced that this was a 3-round tournament rather than a single adventure, but maybe I'm wrong about that. There's a lot of material here to get through in 4 hours. But it was a different style of play in 1979 as well, right? So in that case, understanding the map is a huge advantage because your plot is very literally A to B, right? Entrance to exit. And if you give the map away, that gives them the route from A to B and literally makes it just follow this line. So the obstacle in the original adventure as written is let's get an understanding of this place and where does this go and what does this open and oh no, we got slowed down by releasing these things and we took damage right? Okay, that's fine. In this adventure, it is not about getting to A to B. It is about going and getting the God's Fire and finding a way to harness it to reshape life in apparently whatever fashion you imagine, right? In which case, having the map is not a shortcut. It's not a huge advantage. And in fact, it becomes a tool for the players to begin to pursue their goal in a discrete, deliberate, organized fashion. They can decide, oh, there's a library here. Let's go to this library and get more information. Maybe get the deck plans for the rest of the ship. Or see if we can activate the security cameras that show us who's living where, etc. Right? But having the map no longer, because we have a different goal, having the map no longer short circuits that goal. And in fact, it helps the players pursue their plans in a way that's satisfying to them because they're no longer waiting for some NPC to say, why don't you go talk to these people? And then they'll tell you to go do this thing. And then you come back and once that's fixed, this other thing happens. You go back to PC number 1, which is very kind of like they're just pinballing between aimlessly, or not aimlessly, but they're pinballing in a very linear fashion between these various little plot points. And it's not satisfying to them because they've actively chosen to follow that, but that's because it's the default choice. We don't know what else to do, therefore we do this, right? So if you think of clues and reveals and pieces of information as tools that the party can use to make an active choice about what they want to do next, it helps the players get more invested in what's going on. They get more hype because it's their plan and they feel more engaged and they feel like the world's more alive and interesting. Yes, it can create some problems for you in terms of planning because 3 different tools put together in a way that you didn't expect might short circuit something that you have planned or might get them off in a direction that you don't anticipate and you're not prepped for or whatever. But that's the curse of the GM, right? And you can always find a way to substitute something in, or create a greater complication, or create a plot trapdoor that drops them down and pops them up in a different spot, you have a lot more leeway to improvise on your side than they do if they're sort of slavishly following these plot shackles that take them from point A to, and then this guy says, go check this out. And so you go do that and you get that accomplished. And that person says, what you really want to do is talk to the witch who's brewing the X and such. And they go and they talk to the witch, and she says, what you really need to do is find the dead wizard's tomb, which will contain the MacGuffin, and so they don't feel like they have an active, engaged choice, and they don't feel like the world is actually as big of an open and dynamic place as you might want to portray it. Right? You might think that you have this really cool, big, wildly detailed campaign world. But if they feel like they only have one choice of what to do next, because there isn't really any other information about what to do next, then it doesn't matter how big your world is. Your players feel like they're being led on a tour rather than forging active choices that make them adventurers. So this is a lot of high-minded DM philosophy that I'm pronouncing here. I believe in it, but I will be the first to tell you I'm not necessarily great at executing it, right? And that's the whole reason that we're having this conversation today, is we've gotten to a point in our adventure, as we talked about on Thursday, where we're no longer really following up plot threads, we're following a thread, and the players have sort of mangled it to the point where it's a plot shred. They're like, they've now abandoned kind of what their initial quest is, which was to go, or not their initial quest, but their last session's active quest was go talk to Sabina and Sebastian. They got in a diversionary combat, and then at the end they decided, well, let's just go follow, I'll ask a god which way the key is, and we'll go look for it ourselves. Which isn't a great plan. But in the absence of any other discrete information about how this place works, where they could go, wandering randomly in one direction is just as good of a plan as wandering randomly in another. So I think it's a very important point that we talk a lot about, like, oh, we really need to think about the plot hook and the player's motivation, things like that. Motivation without the information to deliberately and intelligently act on it doesn't do you a whole lot of good. It really just leads to frustration, right? And I think we're kind of on the point with this week's session where the players have fumbled enough with what's going on that we're at the borders of frustration. I think there's probably behind the scenes frustration going on of I don't know what to do next. We just don't know. So I would suggest we fix that. What's going on? Nothing's going on. Great. So I suggest we fix that, right? Now, what's the best way to fix that? We dump information on them in one way or another. So let's talk about this process that I call query obstacle reveal, right? So query obstacle reveal is basically a 3-part thing. There is the query part of it. What is a question that's in the player's mind, or what is a question the players are likely to answer? Obstacle is what is the thing that is preventing them from getting that information? What do they need to discover or overcome in order to, part 3, reveal that information, right? So it is a way of analyzing what your players know and what they don't know, and what you can do to help bring their knowledge into focus so that they can actually act in an intelligent manner, whether it is pursuing a plan or understanding something about the plot. And I think to me the plot is always sort of abstract, right? The plot is a series of realizations that you come to that are maybe attached to obstacles. But when I think of the plot of an adventure, I always think about it as things that you discover about a situation or circumstance, right? What was the plot of the murder mystery that we ran, right? The plot was somebody gets poisoned on stage. They're a big time actor. Um, it turns out that a couple different people were hired to disrupt this performance. It turns out that they were hired by a specific person. It turns out that specific person is an Asmodeus worshiper. And then, as it turns out that there was a larger plot, which was to substitute Asmodeus with the goddess Sun, right? But all of these things are realizations. They're all abstract concepts or information that the players realize. It isn't necessarily anything that they had to overcome, right? It's not something they can discreetly act upon. So I don't remember exactly why I wanted to make that distinction, but to me the plot is abstract, but the plan is concrete, right? The plans that the PCs pursue need to be concrete, or by definition they are concrete, right? That's kind of our theme today, right? So let's talk a little bit about things that. Yeah, I'm gonna make I got a note here, but so let's talk a little bit about things that the players do or do not know. I think, as I've mentioned earlier, their understanding of how the maze that they're in. I've described this thing as a maze or a labyrinth, right? Now, I feel like that's an accurate description. It was interesting and compelling, but much like the language barrier, it's become too much of an impediment to the players making informed logical choices or gathering information, right? Those are kind of the two. That's sort of the two-step dance of being a player, right? Is you gather information and then you make a logical, deliberate response to it, and something happens, which in turn should reveal more information, and then they make a logical, deliberate response to it, right? That's the player dance, and eventually it ends in they make that response and they get treasure, XP, gold, magic item, glory, whatever it is, right? So, in the early going, it was good to describe this thing as a maze. It's sort of incomprehensible. You wander down these long passageways. There are various plants and other features and the climate and all that kind of stuff, right? That's all fine. But it's now become an arbitrary barrier that prevents them from acting in an intelligent, logical way. So one of the players' questions is like, where do we go next? That's clearly something that they're trying to address. Where do we go? How do we get to engineering? We know we need a blue card. Okay, that's all they know. They don't know the path there. They don't know any obstacles in between, etc. Right? What is the obstacle to them learning how to get to engineering? It could be a number of things, right? Somebody needs to tell them, or they need to discover it. Those are kind of like two of our go-to things in a query obstacle reveal. The obstacle is no one has told them yet, so they need to encounter a person who has that information and ask them of it. Or they haven't, they just don't know, and therefore they need to find a map. The obstacle is there's a map somewhere that's hidden, right? But I think the important thing, and the reveal would be, oh, okay, here's the map of the ship, or of the deck, or whatever it is. Or somebody says, here's the way that you get there. And along the way, you will note these three things. You will stop at a medical center. There's a library on the right, and then beyond that, there's a security station with a lot of robots. Be careful around there, right? Well, when you give them that sort of information, they can make an informed, deliberate plan. Does it really change the plot? No, it doesn't, right? But I think the important thing to assess or consider when you're looking at what are the questions the players have and what's preventing them from learning more information or from learning the answer to that question. The obstacle in between, 90% of the time, is going to be arbitrary. It's as simple as no one has told them yet. They haven't found a medium that will convey that information, whether it's a clue that's in a diary or a book or a map or whatever it is, right? But that obstacle, because we're playing Dungeons and Dragons and you're the dungeon master, that obstacle is 90% of the time going to be arbitrary, something that you have imposed or decided they should not know. 10% of the time, it'll be something that's like plot relevant. They can't know this because that, unravels the entire plot. If they know who the identity of the murderer is right at the top of the murder mystery investigation, most of everything, like, you radically have to change what your adventure is. And in some respects, like you see, we did end up changing what the end of that of our last murder mystery investigation was, in terms of it turned out to reveal a greater plot. That was like the twist. We probably could have had like 3 sessions where they discover the murderer and then all this like crazy shit blows up, right? So there are ways to deal with it, but there's that 10% of the time where it's like, well, if they knew that, then the whole adventure becomes radically foreshortened and compressed, and we would need to change kind of like what the outcome, what the actual arc of the adventure is. It short circuits the arc of the adventure. But 90% of the time, I don't know, these are statistics that I've made up, obviously, right? But 90% of the time, there's an arbitrary reason why they don't know it. A lot of times it's in the interests of, verisimilitude, right? Oh, it wouldn't be realistic. It'd be too coincidental for this wandering bard to just happen to drop by the tavern and know that X, Y, and Z, that this is happening with the Bard's College in town, or whatever the particular circumstance is. We convince ourselves as DMs, oh, that's giving too much away. And I would encourage you, it's certainly a lesson that I've learned the hard way, and that I continue to learn, but I would encourage you to give away a little bit more of your secrets, right? I've talked about this before. As the GM, you are not the keeper of secrets. You are the revealer of information. So if you're not revealing information, you're not facilitating good gameplay. You're not enabling players to develop an understanding of what's happening and how they should respond, right? But it's very easy, it certainly, we have our DM screen, and every adventure is like, if you're a player, do not read any further. There's a lot of social weight. There's a lot of urging going on in terms of, urging is not quite the right word, but there's certainly a lot of emphasis placed on the fact that you should have secrets. You should keep information to yourself as the DM, and only dole it out when the players have done, the trigger that opens this door, or killed the monster, or captured the guy who knows this thing, or freed the hostage who blah 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 blah, right? And I think that's misguided. It's certainly sort of drilled into you by the way that the way books are structured. And there's a DM's guide. Players don't get to touch that. There's a player's handbook. The monster manual is hands off. There's a real clear mark of delineation that's drawn between the DM and the players. And it reinforces this idea that if the players get too much information, the game becomes too easy for them. I don't think that's true, and I don't know that it's how deliberate it is, but it's just a side effect of the way things are set up and the way things originated. Originally, when your goal was to get to the bottom of the dungeon and get the treasure, then knowing the map is a huge advantage. In our circumstance, the player's question of where do we go next, knowing the map is doesn't necessarily short circuit the plot. It just helps them figure out where to go next, where they want to go next. If they want to go directly to engineering, that's fine. There's a lot of other interesting things going on. There's a lot more complications I can add on top of what's going on in engineering. So let's get to that part of it. So that was the main point that I wanted to make about query obstacle reveal. Is when you're breaking things down in this particular fashion, what questions do the players have? What's getting in the way? What's preventing them from knowing that? And then what's revealed? What information do they glean from the back end of this? And maybe hopefully it's a twist. Hopefully it's beyond, it's extra information that they didn't expect. They learned something surprising. But that thing in the middle, that obstacle that's holding them back from punching through, that's arbitrary. And you as the DM and I as the DM have 100% control over whether they know that or not. It can be as simple as you find a map. It can be as simple as someone arrives on the scene or whatever. It can be as simple as you remember your character. Everybody give me an intelligence check. Your character remembers being stuck in a maze like this once, and your master told you the story of how they used a divining rod to find their way through it, because the maze was based on some sort of electricity or energy. Great, well, let's make a divining rod. Doesn't completely illustrate my point, but, or I'm not saying that's a solution to everything, but the point stands in terms of the obstacles that stand between the players and the knowledge that they're seeking are made up by you, and you have the freedom and authority to let go of them anytime you want. You're allowed to tell the players things. Your favorite Uncle Dave says, I guess I was lucky where my mentor DM told me that I am not a DM, I'm a storyteller, and the more fun they have, the more they want to play. That's absolutely true, right? I think there is something baked into D&D that there is, the fundamental play experience is action, obstacle, reward, right? Or information, obstacle, reward. That's the play experience. If you want to level up, you have to defeat X number of monsters. If you want to buy more plate mail, you need to earn X amount of treasure. If you want to have, +2 to strength, you need to get up to this level or whatever, right? And in order to do that, you have to overcome obstacles. It's a very Skinner box type of setup, and it works wonderfully. It's wonderfully effective in that way. And I would say that paradigm sets D&D off from storytelling, right? Storytelling, it purely by itself isn't necessarily like as push the lever, push the button. And in fact, a lot of times, in order to create a really great story, your hero protagonists need to suffer a great setback, right? That's the classic dramatic arc, is Act 2, darkness, bad things happen to our character, and then on the verge of sudden defeat, or inevitable defeat, they push through and achieve more. And that's where D&D kind of like breaks that mold, right? So a dramatic arc kind of goes like this, right? It forms this little like, we learn, we become competent, and then the threats get worse, and we're beaten down to like bad, to our worst circumstances, and somehow we overcome that adversity and push through to triumph, right? And the problem that we often have with Dungeons & Dragons is we try and replicate that experience through combat, but this part of it is low hit points, low spell capabilities, no daily abilities or whatever one-time use tricks that you have are left, and you're trying to balance that fine needle of like, well, how do I push them through to triumph, to that great dramatic moment? And the truth is that most D&D kind of goes like this. You start out in maximum capabilities, and then you drop down, and you kind of, through good encounter balance, like weasel your way through. It's not the same arc, right? The power arc of a set of sessions or whatever, or let's say a final climactic session, right? You start at the top of your abilities, and you get worse, and you really only kind of triumph because you manage, because it's a war of attrition, your hit points versus their hit points. So you're hoping, if this is the bad guy and these are the heroes, you're hoping the bad guy drops off before the heroes do. Well, that's not the dramatic arc of a book or a movie, which is that Black Panther, has to suffer a horrible defeat before he can overcome Killmonger. Spoiler alert: the villain is named Killmonger. Um, Likewise, if we go back to let's say one of my favorite movies is Iron Man, right? Iron Man needs to push his suit kind of to the absolute limit, absolute breaking point, but then he somehow summons this extra resolve and makes a dramatic sacrifice, which then blows Ironmonger away. Honestly, he doesn't do anything. It's Pepper who ends up acting, right? um, but that's an important thing to just it's an important distinction to keep in mind, is that yes, we are storytellers, but the lessons that you learn from storytelling don't necessarily map one for one to the play experience of Dungeons and Dragons. I think we could probably hack Dungeons and Dragons to more accurately model that type of experience, but then we're really not playing canonical Dungeons and Dragons, right? Beelzebub7, thanks for subbing up. Yeah, if you want to give one of our players a reroll tomorrow night or tonight, we're playing Starfinder. Certainly that's something you get for subbing up. That's a little bonus that you get. So I'm not going to go deep into an analysis of query obstacle reveal today in terms of where we're at with our given circumstances with the adventure. I think what I will generally say is the players have a lot of questions, and they don't have the tools or clues to get them their proper answers. So what we need to do is, this will probably be another one of our big information dump sessions of let's give them tools and clues that help them get to make some deliberate, intelligent decisions about how they want to proceed. Because right now it's just become a pinball game of talk to somebody, get sent off in a random direction, bounce off that bumper, come back in another seemingly random direction, right? Yeah. So that's something to that's where I'm at with where I think the game is at. We talked on Thursday about how kind of the plot just isn't coming into focus, and I think in order to propel the game to the next level and make the players get more excited and engaged and feel like they have a mastery of what's going on, right? In D&D, we create a lot of mysteries. You don't know why this curse has settled upon the town. It's your job to go investigate, right? And I think there's a danger in letting those mysteries become too precious. And without the tools to investigate the mysteries, the players don't feel like they can accomplish anything. So, that's that. There's one other thing that I want to talk to here in the last 10 minutes that we have left, right? And that is another issue that I think is very common, that I've noticed lately in my own DMing, right? And so while I'm happy to dispense this advice and share my experience with you, I want to make sure that you understand that it's my experience and I'm continuing to learn myself, right? That this is a joint journey that we're on. And despite how many years I've been playing D&D, I'm still learning how to be a better DM. And so don't feel bad if you've only been playing D&D for 2 weeks or 2 years or whatever. there's room to grow. There's plenty of room to grow. So, uh, yeah. All right. That's just sort of my disclaimer, and that DMing is not an easy job. That's why I think we need more of them, and why we don't have more of them is because DMing is the fun of it is a lot different than being a player, and the investment is a lot greater than being a player. Then responsibility is literally 10 times that of being a player. Or take your number of players and multiply by that X and get that much responsibility, because you're responsible for everybody at the table kind of having an equal opportunity to chime in. Anyway, all right, so one last thing that I have discovered is it's very easy to sit behind the DM screen, and when a player tells you that they want to do something, that you judge their action based on how reasonable of a response this is to whatever information that they have. Right? So, for instance, let's say that they encounter a giant crystal door, right? And I'm trying to think of a good example here. But let's say they encounter a giant crystal door, and they decide that their best way of getting through this crystal door, doesn't have any handles to it or anything like that, is to cast Dispel Magic on it. Or maybe you know that it's magical, and they decide they want to hit it with a hammer or a sword, right? And so let's put it that way. It's a crystal door, it has runes on it, and somebody says, I'm going to hit this thing with a hammer, and I'm going to shatter it. Even though they don't. Like, I have a magic weapon, it doesn't do anything special against objects, but I have a +1 warhammer. I'm gonna smash this door. Before that action is adjudicated, there's that moment, I've certainly had this, where you as the DM go, this is such a dumb idea. It's crystal, it has runes etched on it, it's lightly glowing, they're gonna hit it. Okay, I'm gonna punish them like to whatever extent that I can. If it says there's Blanseer, thanks for the donation, appreciate it. If there's one thing that's absolutely the dumbest thing to do, it's to hit this thing. I think this is a natural response. I think it's a very dangerous response. Because here's what's happening, right? There's an inequality in terms of information. You have the full context on your side. You have the full context on your side of the DM screen, right? They have a very narrow view into the full set of circumstances. They just have this little pie slice of what's going on. Also, they may be acting, this is filtered through what they think their character might do. So if they're playing this dumb, gruff barbarian dwarf who has a warhammer and his solution to things is to hit them, it's not fair to judge that action as going, well, it says clearly here in the module that this person's going to take, 15 die 8 worth of lightning damage when the glyph of warding goes off. That's you using your information to judge their response to what little information, what little piece of the whole scenario that they actually understand or have received, right? And on top of that, like I said, it may get filtered through a role-playing angle of, I know this is dumb, but this is what my character would do. He's not that smart. And so I think it's dangerous for us to punish players for ideas that we subjectively think are stupid, right? as the DM, we're constantly sort of like synthesizing information, right? The players, we describe the environment and what's happening, and the players synthesize that information and they create a response. We, in turn, synthesize their response together with the additional information that the players don't know, but that we have hidden in our notes or behind our DM screen, right? And as Thomas W.D. Young, right, points out, is that sometimes people decide to take action because they're tired of talking about it. But the point being, and I've certainly fallen into this trap myself, is that you as the DM go, well, this is dumb, and therefore I'm going to make the consequence, like punish them for their stupidity. And on the one hand, you're punishing the players for not understanding information that you may have miscommunicated, or they don't have the full picture, or maybe you just think it's a dumb idea, like you're punishing them because you don't like this idea. And that's the main thing, right? Is that when the players do this, it's a way for them to indicate how they want to play the game. And if you're disturbed or upset or resentful of this, then there's probably a disconnect between how you want to play the game and the right way to solve this problem, and what the player's idea of how they want to play the game and the right way to solve this problem, right? Oh, 15d8 would, I don't know if it would kill a player. Let's see, average damage is 4.5, so that's 9 times 7, 72. That's about 80 points of damage. This depends. My players are very hardy. I don't know about you, Dave, but why are you being so stingy with the hit points? That's my question. But it gets into an issue of, I've decided that I as the DM have decided this is a stupid course of action, and therefore I'm going to punish players for following this course of action. And I'm not saying that it isn't occasionally warranted, that if the players do something rash or that they haven't thought through, that it gets them into more trouble, right? But what I am saying is you have to be careful and note those moments when these things happen, because if they happen often enough, there may be a problem in how you're presenting things. There may be a problem in how you're designing your challenges. And there may be a fundamental misunderstanding or disconnect between what you think is an interesting and fun way to play and what they think is an interesting, fun way to play. Right? And that goes back to kind of old school D&D of, let's approach everything in a very tactical manner, and here's our marching order, and the thief scouts ahead, and he's moving with stealth, and we have a signal, and all that, right? Versus what I would say is a little more shirt sleeve, narrative style of play, which is, let's play it, I don't know, a little more casually, not get so fine-grained in how we slice the elements, etc. Yes, we proceed forward cautiously, deliberately and cautiously, taking some reasonable measures to keep a low profile. Okay, I don't need any more details than that, right? Do I? There are certain circumstances where I do, but you know what? Be a fan of the players. Okay, well, I assume that you're, have da-da-da-da-da. You start asking a bunch of tactical questions, and the game starts to bog down into the minutia of how do I play the best tactically, and not every player gets off on playing a very tactical game, right? So you have to play to all of your players' chosen play styles. So, that's, right. So as Blind Seer points out, fun has to be at the heart of the game, but there has to be a way to meet in the middle so that everyone is having fun. There are certainly times for a very tactical and specific, fine-grained, detailed, grim and gritty kind of scenario or encounter. And there are times where it's more free-rolling, role-playing. Yeah, right, why not? You swing, across on the chandelier or whatever it is. A little more epic style. So I would just say, and this is something I've caught myself doing, is be wary of, are you judging the player's actions subjectively, well, according to the scenario? Are you judging them objectively, according to the scenario, this happens when you do this? Or are you judging them subjectively in, I think this is a dumb idea, so I'm going to make X, Y, and Z happen? They're two different, it's two different things, but just make a little mental check mark anytime you go, why are they doing this? Because you can't go, why are they doing this? I need to punish them for it. You need to ask yourself, why are they doing this? Can I understand, is this part of a greater pattern? And does the source of that pattern lie mostly on the player side of the screen, mostly on the DM side of the screen, or is there something else happening in the interaction between those two things that's making me go, I don't know why they would do this? And likewise, you see this happen between players too, where like half the table goes, why would you do that? That's also something to take note of. But I just wanted to have just a brief moment talking about judging players' actions, because there's a difference between adjudicating players' actions and judging them. I'm not saying that either of them is 100% wrong 100% of the time, or 100% applicable 100% of the time, but I am saying when you notice yourself falling into the subjective side of things, ask yourself a deeper question about what's going on at your table. All right, so there we go. It's 1:30. I have to be someplace in an hour, so I have to take the dog over to the dog sitter and change clothes and all that sort of fun stuff. Thanks everyone for joining me. It was great to see everybody jump in. I thought we had a really great, this is a very philosophical discussion today, but I thought there were some very worthy ideas that came out of this. I know we didn't get in a ton into the specifics of what's going to happen tomorrow, but I think that's okay, right? I have a pretty good idea of like what my challenges are, and I think that's pretty obvious from the discussion that we've had here, right? So our players are dealing with an information vacuum. What are some of the different ways that manifests itself, and what are some of the different things that we can do to alleviate that? That's what we covered today, and I hope it's been a worthwhile discussion for you. It seems like it'd be more broadly applicable to what's going on in your game as well, today's discussion. So hopefully you got something worthwhile out of it. I certainly, it was worth it for me to kind of like air these thoughts in a very specific context here with all of you here. So I am glad you're enjoying the Twitter pics of my dog. Thanks everyone for joining me today. Hey, what's on our calendar tonight? There's a very special Starfinder game kicking off. Tyler Rhodes is DMing a 3-episode arc of Starfinder. You can catch that tonight. It's an all-new mini-campaign. Nika Harper, Dan Peck, Jordan Pridgeon, Jesse Durant, and GM Tyler Rhodes are up tonight at 8 o'clock. It's going to be, I believe, a 3-week campaign. So it'll be a cool little mini arc. If you're curious about Starfinder, now is a great way to get in touch. Tomorrow night, you'll see how all of this plays out as I run my game of the Ironkeep Chronicles. Thursday, I'm back here, right here in my little office at 2 o'clock. We'll not be in the studio. Dom has some other things going on. So I'll be back at 2 o'clock. We'll talk about how the game went on Thursday and probably do some Q&A and talk about your specific game and what's going on. At 8 o'clock, there's only 2 episodes left. Catch one while you can. Never Tell Me the Odds with America's GM, DJ David Crennan. You can catch that at 8 o'clock on Thursday. Friday, of course, Wildcards returns, and Sunday is Tempting Fate. Dom, I'm not sure. Is this Army of Darkness? Is this part 3 that's happening? Is that what's going on? So, and Dom points out in the chat that we just released some annotated actual play videos of Starfinder on our YouTube channel, so you can check out our YouTube channel. So, those are all the exciting things that are happening later on this week on Saving Throw Show. Also, the end of the month is coming. If you are not a Patreon backer, now is an ideal time to get involved. I did post some things, as I've been rebooting and creating new material for this Expedition to the Barrier Peaks game, I have been releasing some of my homebrew materials to our Patreon backers. Now is a great time to get involved in the Patreon. There's plenty of resources waiting for you there. Also, you get access to experience pointers, or the DM podcasts done by Megan Caves and Jordan Callerman and Gaurav Galati, as well as a variety of other benefits. And also just your regular support helps us budget for the things that are going on here on Savings. It's nice to have everyone's donations and keep churning the mill as best we can, but it's very helpful for us to have Patreon support and your sponsorship. So consider that. So that is the Buzzaloonie. Thank you so much to Dom and all of our mods who help keep our channel safe, friendly, clean, and accessible. Great chatting with you all. Until next time, let's dungeon! Oh, I did it way better than Dom did. Way better.